Hello, this is Fairy Garden Startup, and today's lesson is going to be on soil, water, and fertilizer. I'm Sandra Rosenaw, and I'm a master gardener with the Benton Franklin County Extension Service. Talking about soil for your fairy garden, people say, why can't I just use what's in my garden? You can go and load up your pot with garden soil and plant your plants, but garden soil comes with wildlife. It's full of insect, bacteria, fungus, nematodes, earthworms, all of which will come into your pot. And that's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. But if you use a potting soil, which is what we recommend, then you have a much more known quantity to be dealing with. So go down to any nursery, ask them what they recommend for a fairy garden, and they will tell you about their products. If you're doing a specialty project, for example, a southwestern design with cactus, then you would probably want to use a cactus mix. So the problem that garden soil has is it becomes very compact and it doesn't hold on to water. The potting soil solved that problem by adding two things, perlite and vermiculite. So I have some examples of that here. Vermiculite looks like sand. It's actually a form of mica, and its purpose is to hold on to water and nutrients. Perlite looks rather like styrofoam. It's that white stuff that you see in the potting soil. And its purpose is to make the potting soil light and fluffy and allows aeration of the roots and for water to move quickly through it. And so the perlite keeps your potting soil fluffy, prevents the compaction. So now you know, when you read that on the label, you'll know what it's for. So when we get to watering, most people water from the top. And that's fine. We need a lot of water in the Tri-Cities for our pots because it's so hot, so dry, and we have desiccating wind. But what happens in a pot is that the plants will go to where the water is. So if you water from the top, then the roots will stay at the top. And that means that you've got potting soil, like in this pot, that is almost never used. The roots will stay in the top 4 inches, which is where the water is. And in essence, the roots will race to where the water is, and they never go further down. The solution is to water in a tray. When you do this, the water will be absorbed up from below. The plants, the lower roots will sense that it's there and they will go after it. And the roots will go further, deeper into the pot. That makes the plant more resilient when it gets hot and dry in the Tri-Cities. If you do watering from below, then you have to remember you might leave it in 30 minutes or an hour and then take it out and let it drain properly. Most of the plants that you use do not like having wet feet. They do not like to sit in water. So drainage is really important if you're using this method. You might want to water as frequently as once a week from below. I don't do that because I have so many pots. Cycling them through would take too much time. So I normally do the watering from the top, and I'm aware that most of my roots don't go very deep. But if you can water from below, that's certainly a really good thing to do. Certainly also, if we have a rainstorm, your plants will love rainwater. I wanted to finish by talking about fertilizer. Potting soil has a limited amount of nutrition in it. Some potting soils have added fertilizer, and after a certain amount of time, the plants use it up. A potting soil that is high in nutrients but doesn't have fertilizer also has a certain amount of time before the plants are no longer getting the nutrients that they need. So be aware of this. You will eventually need to fertilize, and the question is when, how much. what I do is I use a high nutrition fertilizer, not one with added fertilizer, and then I change the potting soil out every couple of years. And even so, I do need to add fertilizer. I prefer to use slow release fertilizer beads. You can buy them in any store. They look like little beads, and you sprinkle them in on top, and every time you water, those beads dissolve a little bit, and that's how the plants get the nutrition. So you do have to water from the top after you've added the beads. If you prefer to use a liquid fertilizer, then read the box when you mix it up, and the box will tell you how often to apply it and how much to apply. I have found that less is more. A fairy garden, you want it to stay small. You don't want it to get to be the big lush thing. Miniature is kind of the idea. So by having less amount of fertilizer, you get the smaller plants, and then if you see that they're looking a little sad, they're not quite as green, then you add a little bit. So that's the best way to handle it. That's about what I had to say about fertilizer. I believe less is more. Also, if you put in too much fertilizer, your plants will get very green and lush, and then you're asking for problems with insects because insects are attracted to lush, soft growth. So this is Fairy Garden Startup. I hope that you now have an idea about fertilizer and water, and happy gardening.